Welcome to the second session in this series, How to Live a Spirit-Led Life. The title of this session is In Step with the Spirit. I'd like to begin with a quiz again. What dangerous thing did I do while in Israel? Did I try hitchhiking? Did I kill a snake? Or try to kill a snake? Did I climb the Western Wall? Or did I milk a camel? Oh, those all sound very adventurous, don't they? Second question, what child's party game is an illustration of trying to chart our own course in life? Is it an obstacle course, pin the tail on the donkey, a dizzy bat race, or an egg toss? Question number 3, where was Paul when the man from Macedonia appeared to him in a vision? Was he in Rome, Bithynia, Portland, or Troas? Final question. Who was the first convert to Christianity in the city of Philippi? Was it the Philippian jailer, a poor slave girl, Lydia, or Timothy? In our last topic, we looked at this photo. And the question I would pose to you now is this. Does God have an A plan for our lives? Does he have an A plan for the decisions that you make in your life? And I have to recognize that sometimes my path has taken me down on the side where there's a lot of lightning and thunder and storms. Maybe I've taken the B, C, or even as they would say the Z plan in Canada or Australia or England, right? We take a different path than the one that God has for us. But I want to challenge us with this verse from Galatians 5, verse 25. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. During one of my years for university, I attended Newbold College in England. It was a tremendous adventure. But in England, there's a lot of rain when winter sets in. So when Christmas break came, I was looking for some place that was warm and sunny, and somehow discovered that tickets to Israel were quite affordable. And so I had the opportunity to travel to the land where Jesus walked, and really it was quite an adventure. I remember as I crested the hill there on the bus, overlooking the Sea of Galilee, I was just in amazement. My mind went to all these biblical scenes and experiences. And then I began to walk around the Sea of Galilee, and quite like biblical stories, a gust of wind blew up and a storm started to come in. And in fact, it blew my hat off, and it took a while for me to be able to find it. And so I'm recalling the storms on the Sea of Galilee. I'm enjoying all this. But then I realized that this is a serious storm. When we looked and saw how far we had wandered from the nearby town, we made a decision to keep going forward, to go ahead rather than go back. And to do that, we stuck out our thumbs and went hitchhiking. Now, if my parents knew I'd done that, they would not have been happy. I was just 19 years old. But somebody picked us up, and they began to drive us around the lake, the Sea of Galilee. My mind was still on biblical scenes as we crossed over the Jordan River, and we continued around the lake. Eventually, the car came to a halt. It stopped, and the man said to us, you're looking for a cheap place to stay. If you just walk down this road right over here for about a mile, you will come to a youth hostel. It's affordable. So we thanked him, and we began walking directly down the road he sent us. The storm, the weather became worse and worse. It began to rain hard. And pretty soon we began to seek cover. And we found some big banana leaves. And we hid underneath those leaves. And as we were there, the leaves would fill up with water and then they would dump on us. It was getting dark now. We were completely miserable. Every once in a while we would hear a sound overhead, kind of sound overhead. And we didn't know what it was because we couldn't see it. It was raining. There was cloud cover. It was getting dark. So we got so tired of the water dumping on our head from the banana leaves that we stepped back out on the road again, and we made another decision. We said, let's hitchhike again. Obviously, these guys sent us down the wrong path. So we held out our thumbs as a vehicle appeared. There were not many. It was very sparse in terms of any vehicles coming along. We held our thumb. The vehicle just went past, sprayed us with more water. So at this point, we're getting desperate. Finally, another vehicle, the headlights appear in the distance, and we decided to stand in the middle of the road and wave them down, which is what we did. As soon as we hopped in the vehicle, they said, "What are you guys doing out here? You must be out of your minds. You must be crazy." We said, "We know, it's terrible weather." They said, "That's not what we're talking about. You are in a military zone." Those individuals that gave us a ride the first time had intentionally sent us into a military zone. The second group that picked us up said, "You guys need to know this, that in this military zone, people shoot before asking questions. Did you hear some noises overhead?" We said, "Yeah, we did. Those were helicopters patrolling the area. You are fortunate that they didn't see you." We knew that God had protected us. We recognized that we had gone down what we thought was a good path, but it had ended up in the wrong place. There are a couple of other biblical characters that have had similar experiences as that. Think about Balaam, for example. God telling Balaam, "You shall not go with the princes of Midian." Very clear, don't go with them. Balaam tells them, "Go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you." Well, the princes, they give a second invitation. And Balaam says this, beautiful words here. "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do less or more." Very clear, isn't it? Let me ask you a question. Was God clear about his intentions for Balaam? He absolutely was. There was no gray area. It was very, very clear what God wanted him to do. There's a third invitation that comes. And Balaam says to the men this time, "Stay here tonight that I may know what more the Lord will say to me." Did God need to give him any more information? No, it was clear. You're not to go. But God says to Balaam, because God honors our free choice, he honors our free will. He says to Balaam, "If the men come to call you, rise and go with them." My question for you is, how did God feel about Balaam's choice? Notice what Numbers 22 verse 32 says. "Behold, I have come out to stand against you because your way is perverse, or it's contrary to me." Certainly we wouldn't want these words spoken about us, would we? We want to make sure that we're following God's path for our lives. Another individual found himself in a bit of trouble as well. God was very clear with his directions. "Jonah, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it." Jonah's response? Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish. Now I want you to look at this map. It is like Jonah went exactly the opposite direction that God wanted him to go. As we reflect on the Bible, there are a number of other characters that we read about in Scripture that also headed in the wrong direction in their life. Think about Samson, where he went to find a wife and so on. Again, he was charting his own path rather than following God's path. In life, today, we sometimes chart our own path, and as a result, we end up where we didn't want to be. It reminds me of a birthday party game, the dizzy bat race. Have you ever tried that one before? It's where you put your head down on a bat and you begin to twirl around the bat. The bat has to stay on the ground. You begin to twirl around it, and then someone says, "Go," and you have to start running toward a finish line. People start falling on the ground, running in all different directions, because they become disoriented. That's what it's like in our life when we don't follow God's leading and God's direction. I had a very special experience a number of years ago that I'd like to share with you. I was attending the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary at Andrews University, and I noticed on the bulletin board an advertisement for a position, an interim position in Australia for a youth director of a local conference. That looked exciting to me. I was involved in youth ministry significantly and thought this would be a tremendous opportunity to see another part of the world, to have another experience, and so I applied. The problem was I didn't hear anything. No communication back. The weeks went by. It was getting close to the next semester. I would need to be registering for my classes. And so I said a very simple prayer. God, I need to have an answer by this date, so I know whether you want me to go or whether I should stay. And I began praying with that date in mind. I didn't share it with anybody. I just prayed for a specific day so that I could make a timely decision about whether I should stay or whether I should go. On that very day, at about 2:00 in the afternoon, I received a phone call. And as I picked up the phone, there was an Australian accent on the other end that said, "G'day." I was excited. But as I began visiting with the individual, they let me know that they were interested in having me come, but they had a few more details to work out. I said nothing to them about the prayer that I'd had with God. At about 6 o'clock that same evening, I received another phone call. Good day. It was Australia again. This time, the man on the phone, Dr. Alan Walsh, said there's just one more detail that needs to be worked out. This was exciting, but it wasn't quite the answer that I'd been praying for. I had prayed for clarity, yes or no, on this particular day. I went to bed that night, and I remember verbally saying, is my faith too small to believe that God can give an answer still today? I actually went to sleep. I woke up to a phone call. I immediately looked at the clock. It was 11:50 p.m. I answered the phone to these words, pack your bags, we want you to come. It was exciting because that whole year I knew that I was exactly where God wanted me to be. This verse in Philippians 4:11 is an important one. It says, I've learned to be content in whatever state I am in. Now I want to give a literal interpretation of that. Whatever state I'm in, whether it's Florida or Oklahoma or California or Western Washington and Oregon, or how about Minnesota? There's the state bird right there, the mosquito. Or Michigan. I dealt with a lot of snow living there. Or perhaps Texas. I was actually born in Texas, so I'm a little bit biased there, even though I grew up in the Northwest. The problem is it's beautiful for about 2 months of the year like this, and then this is what the rest of the year looks like. Now, we know that Paul wasn't literally talking about what state that a person lives in, but there's a similarity. It's meaning that the meaning is that we need to learn to be content in any and every situation that we find ourselves. What enabled Paul to sing while he was in prison? Or to praise God when under house arrest in Rome? Or to take bread and give thanks right before an impending shipwreck? How could Paul do that? Because he was exactly where God wanted him to be. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. One of the things that's interesting is we talk about open doors and closed doors. Did you know that that's a biblical concept? That's where that idea comes from, of God opening doors or closing doors. One of the examples of that takes place in Acts chapter 16, verses 6 through 10. There's a Spirit-led team, a missionary team that involved Paul, Timothy, and Silas. Now later Luke joins them. We'll catch up with that in a moment. But this is a team that is in touch with God. I mean, they want to go wherever God leads them. Paul, his theme in life is, for me to live as Christ. Timothy is referred to as a true son in the faith, and Silas is identified as a prophet. And yet, they are guided by hindrance, or we could say they're guided by closed doors. They want to do something for God, they want to serve him, and yet the doors keep closing. They try to go to the Roman province of Asia Minor, and the Spirit doesn't permit them. They try to go to Bithynia, but the Spirit doesn't permit them. Closed door, guided by hindrance. And then a vision appears to Paul in the night. A man from Macedonia stood pleading with him, saying, "Come to Macedonia and help us." I want to ask you a question about this. Who was the man from Macedonia? Who was this person that appeared to Paul in this vision? Well, to unpack that just a bit, we need to put together a couple of the puzzle pieces. Where did Paul go in response to this vision that says, "Come to Macedonia and help us"? Where did he go? We know he went immediately. Where was it? And then what was his strategy when he got there? Well, Paul ended up in the town of Philippi. It was a Roman province. It was at the crossroads where people would pass through. It was a significant city. And as you see Paul here in this cartoon photo, you see that they're looking for the Jewish synagogue, because that was always Paul's approach. Whenever he arrived in a new town, a new village, he would go first to the Jewish synagogue and begin to reason with the Jews first. There's a challenge, however, because as Paul and his companions looked around Philippi, they didn't locate a synagogue. Why? There were not enough Jewish men that were believers to erect a synagogue. Josephus tells us that 10 Jewish men that were believers needed to be present in a community to build a synagogue. So there were not 10 men there. In fact, if we're looking for a man that appeared to Paul when he came to Macedonia, as he looked around, he didn't find any men who were believers. What he found was a group of women that met on the Sabbath day by the Gangites River to worship and to pray. Again, Paul doesn't find that man from his vision. So who was the man? Well, some people say, well, maybe it was an angel that appeared to Paul. Well, Paul would have been familiar with encounters with angels. Maybe it was Jesus who appeared to Paul. Well, Paul had encountered Jesus on the Damascus Road, so if it was him, certainly Paul would have made that reference. So who was the man? I believe that the man that appeared to Paul in this dream, in this vision, was none other than the Philippian jailer. Paul didn't find the man from Macedonia until he was thrown into jail. Now, this would look like an apparent setback for Paul. Here he's arrived in Philippi to share the gospel. There's no Jewish synagogue. There's no believers that he can begin sharing with. And then he's thrown into jail, beaten and thrown into jail. And yet it's there that Paul likely sees the man that he saw in the vision. In fact, it makes sense now that Paul began to sing in prison because he knew in a short time that this man and his whole family would be converted. Friends, I believe it's the unchurched that are calling out, saying, come to Macedonia and help us. There's so many opportunities all around us. Diane, an overwhelmed single mom. Marco, a displaced Ukrainian refugee. Lydia, a university student searching for meaning in life. Norm, a homeless vet suffering from PTSD. Jasmine, a 10-year-old girl desperate for her parents to stay together. Jose, concerned about his health and determined to change. Notice this quote. There are open fields inviting workers to enter. The harvest is ripe. And the earnest Macedonian cry for laborers. Okay. There are open fields inviting workers to enter. The harvest is ripe. And the earnest Macedonian cry for laborers is heard from every part of the world. We have no great men to send. Take a look at some of these great men. Dwight Nelson, John Bradshaw, Carlton Bird, David Ashrick, Alejandro Bullion. And then we have our Union Evangelism Director, Bill McClendon. But what are we told here? There are no great men to send. There aren't any. But there are many single-hearted sons and daughters. Love that she includes both men and women here in this quote. Sons and daughters of God who will take hold of the work at any place, and God will give them wisdom if they are meek and lowly followers of Jesus. God provided an open door for Paul and his team. And he says this, furthermore, when I came to Troas to preach Christ's gospel, a door was opened to me by the Lord. Isn't that beautiful? I want to ask you a question. What door is God opening for you? Let's go to our quiz now. First question. What dangerous thing did Pastor Tom do in Israel? Well, it was hitchhiking, and believe me, I won't do that again. Second question. What child's party game is an illustration of trying to chart our own course in life? That one is the Dizzy Bat Race. C's the correct answer on that one. Where was Paul when the man from Macedonia appeared to him? It was not Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine. It was actually in Troas where that vision took place. And the final one here, who was the first convert to Christianity in Philippi? That was the Philippian jailer. So here's our key verse in terms of being led by the Spirit in our lives. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let's not run ahead. Let's not lag behind. Let's be right in step with the Spirit as we live our lives.